Hi, what up? Welcome to my June reads. I know we're already in the middle of July, but I read a lot of books in June and we're going to get through them as fast as we can, so let's get right into it. The first book that I read was Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. And the copy that I have is my mother's, and it was published in Soviet Union in 1971. So while I was reading it, I kept in mind that maybe some things have been changed in this book, and I got really curious to see if the English one, the original one, is similar or not. But I can completely understand why it was published in Soviet Union, because it deals with the Second World War, and it is quite favorable towards Soviet Union, who was at that time the ally of USA and England or Great Britain. And I can understand why this had such a big impact during the time it was published, because it is very anti-war and very much in the pacifist state, because it doesn't glorify war, it doesn't really tell the war stories like they were told before that time. So it tells a story about this one guy who later becomes optometrist, how he deals with being captured and then sent to Dresden, which is later bombed, and which is one of the greatest war crimes of the Allied forces, but that's never really discussed. We usually only discuss the war crimes of Germany, which are very important. We also in Estonia discuss the war crimes of Soviet Union, because Estonia was involved in those, mainly as the suffering party. And in this book it really shows that war is a terrifying thing. It's not glorious, it's not heroic, and for people who take part in it, it has lasting consequences. As for this main character, who later starts to believe that he has been abducted by aliens, he creates this whole parallel world for himself, and even until the end of his life seems to believe that he's somehow special and has been to the alien zoo and displayed there. So yes, if you haven't read it, I suggest you do. For me, it wasn't as eye-opening as it may be for some others, because I have dealt with the subject matter being a history teacher. So let's go to something completely different. And the second book that I finished in June was Annihilation. It looks like this, and it was written by Jeff VanderMeer. So I learned about this book because Goodreads kept recommending it to me, also because I saw the Netflix trailer for this movie, and it starred Natalie Portman as the main lead, so I thought that it would be interesting. The story of the book is that there's a secret project, a secret area of, well, Earth then, I guess, where strange things happen, and the government has been researching it, sending research parties to this area, and all of the parties either haven't returned or have returned, and they are not quite the same. So this story follows a young woman who goes in one of those research groups to see what this area is all about, and right from the beginning strange things start to happen. It's it's amazing. Right from the beginning, like I said, things start to happen, and when some books really take maybe 50 pages, even 100 pages for the story to start, this book was like, bam! I was already on page 20, and I was so immersed, and I was so puzzled by everything that was going on. Yes, it was only 20 pages in. One of my work mates really loves this book, so she was really excited that I was reading it. When I finished it, I wasn't quite satisfied. I was still curious about the world, so I bought the second book, which is there on the bedside table. Yes, on my bedside table, waiting to be read. It goes really fast. You really have to pace yourself if you want to experience it and not just be done with it. And there's a third edition as well. I've heard different things about the Netflix movie, so I think I'm going to read all three of them and then look at the movie from the perspective of having read the books. I didn't want to watch the movie before. So that was the second book that I read. Also, when talking about TV shows and books, the third book that I finished was Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I have a separate review video of it up in my YouTube channel, and I read it for a book club that me and some of my friends have, and the review is for a book club, so I don't really go in detail about the book's premise, but I do talk about how it made me feel. So if you're interested in, you can find the video. And now going forward, the fourth book, I guess, yes, the fourth book that I read was Jessica Bennet was the author, and the book was called Feminist Fight Club, a survival manual for a sexist workplace. So I really loved this book. It was funny, it was quirky, it reminded me a lot about the newspaper articles or internet blog posts, and it makes sense because this writer is somebody who writes for newspapers and blogs. So the main idea of this book is that now when we work in a work environment, we don't experience the same sexism that women experienced during 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s even, and now the sexism is more hidden. And this is a manual really to teach young women, or maybe even older women, to tackle the sexism, how to make yourself more heard. It's very funny, and it's very inclusive. You really feel like part of a group, or a part of a support group even. I really suggest this book to everybody who is working in office. I can't really tell you if all the things that they suggest here work, because I work in an environment where most of the colleagues I have are female, so I really can't vouch for anything in it, but I think it really gives you a sense of yourself and how you should be appreciated at a workplace if you put in the effort, and how to make the others see that you're a valuable worker, and also how to make yourself see that you are valuable and you deserve things. It doesn't teach you that you deserve things when you don't put any effort, so don't start with that. But yes, it's a fun book, and it's a great gift book. I would really suggest buying it for a gift when your friend is kind of down in the dumps about how things are at work. Okay, what else? Now for some pictures. I read, I guess you can call it 3 picture books. The first was Malala's pen about the young activist from Pakistan, Malala's life story, and I bought it to give it to my friend's child who was turning 1. No, not really a book you want to give a 1-year-old, but I think it will be a nice addition to her bookshelf, and this is definitely an inspirational story that you should read to a young girl about education, about speaking up, about making a difference in the world. And yeah, it was a short book, mainly, yes, basically written for children, but it was a fun read. Now, another picture book for children that I read was The Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo. And if you're a fan of John Oliver, then you know that he had a segment about how the Vice President of United States, Mike Pence, was publishing a book about his cute pet rabbit, which is the only cute thing about him. And to combat it, the show decided that they would publish the same book with the same title, but with a different subject matter. So here in this book, the bunny called Marlon Bundo, which is the name he shares with Mike Pence's bunny, finds another bunny in the yard who is called Wesley, and this is what Wesley looks like. Isn't he cute? And they hop around together, and in the end they decide to get married, but they can't because there's this really bad stink bug who looks exactly like Mike Pence, saying that you can't get married, this is not right, and I say it because I'm in charge and you can't combat me. And what all of the other animals in the yard then do is that they vote, and they vote to get the stink bug out of the place of power, and then Marlon and Wesley can get married. So here they are getting married. It's the cutest thing, and it really shows you the story of love, of finding somebody, and also a story of taking matters into your own hands. If you're not happy with the situation, you can go and vote, and I think that's a really cool message to put for kids in a children's book, because the fairy tales are good, but you also have to tell how to change the world. You can't just wait things to happen or a golden apple to fall on your head. You have to take matters into your own hands. I adore this book. I was so surprised that it was being sold in Raffa-Ramat. So I suggest, if you want it, go get it, and all of the money that comes from the sales of this book will be donated to 2 charities. One I think was AIDS one, and the other one was for LGBT teens or kids. I don't know. Anyway, for a good cause, you can look it up. I loved it. And the last picture book that I read was a photography one. So it was pictures of Soviet Union bus stops, all the Soviet Union states besides Russia itself. So it was Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, then Romania, Georgia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, a couple others, and the author of that was Cristopher Herwig, Herwig. And this was one of the books I saw on either on BuzzFeed or Bored Panda, and it had this amazing shots of different kinds of bus stops in Soviet Union, and I wanted that book, and I jumped the gun and ordered it. When I saw it on Amazon, I was like, yes, I've wanted it for 2 years now, I'm going to order it. And right now I can't show it to you because my mother is looking through it, and she really likes it as well. When the main idea of the book is that the architecture of Soviet Union was very regulated, it was very massive, it had a purpose, and it was quite similar across the different states. But the bus stops were a place where the architects could play around, and the bus stops were a place where the graduating architecture students could do something different. It's so weird to see how a bus stop in Kazakhstan's differences differentiate. How a bus stop in Kazakhstan is different from a bus stop in Georgia, and then different from a bus stop in Estonia. The first thing is materials, the second thing is usability. They were like art. Okay, let's try to wrap this up. I don't know which book I read. Another of the books I read was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And it's about a young girl who expresses herself through slam poetry, and talks about her first crush and how it progresses, and how she lives in a very conservative and religious household. The main character is called Xiomara, and she's from Dominican family, and it's a different voice. I picked it up and I saw that there were poems here, and I just leafed through it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, I want to read it. And then when I started to read it, I realized that the whole thing is written in poems, and it flows so well, and it's really another experience to read it, because there's something so beautiful, so rhythmic, so enchanting about it, and I really loved it. If you want to pick up something different, it is young adult, and it is just a love story in a sense, but it's also a story about finding your own voice and really making yourself heard and growing up. I absolutely love it. It's such a nice refresher to other young adult books that I have read this year. And the other young adult book that I read, I lent from a friend, and that was called Radio Silence, and it was written by, let me find the name, Alice Oseman. Radio Silence. And if you heard the podcast Night Whale, or read the book, it's kind of similar. So it tells a story about a podcast that this girl, the main character, is listening to, and that's the only thing in her life that is kind of odd or weird, because during the day she's the head girl in school. She's very motivated to get in Oxford. She studies all the time, and the picture that is displayed to people who are not her mom is a very studious person who really has a one-track mind. But in reality, she draws fan art, that she listens to this podcast, and She has a quite quirky sense of style, and she's really likable. And she finds out that one of the other non-remarkable persons, people that she knows, is actually the creator of Radio Silence, this podcast that has been part of her life for over a year. And they become friends, and then stuff happens. And what I especially want to bring out is that, again, it's a very inclusive book. It's LGBTQA, especially A. One of the characters is asexual, and it was really refreshing to read it. I really loved it. Some of the parts at the end were kind of over the top. I was like, oh, that was just what? I don't understand the choice, but then again, I couldn't really figure out how else the author could have done that part. If you get to it, you understand. But if you really want to pick up a young adult book, it's very much recommended. I gave it 5 stars. I put it on my favorites shelf in Goodreads. I really loved it. I don't know what it was about it. It was told in really short chapters, and I kind of liked it because the mood kind of bounced around. I don't know, it felt young, it felt reminiscent of my own past, and yes, it was so good. I read a lot of good books this month. I'm really happy about it. Okay, then continuing it's called A Brief Introduction, and it doesn't have an author. It just says asexualityarchives.com, so I guess it's compiled of different things on that website. That said, it was one person who put this together, and while there are a lot of interesting and new things or new ways to explain it, a lot of it really starts to get really personal. I think last 30 pages are completely unnecessary. It feels that like the author hasn't really quite figured out this asexuality for himself as he thinks he has. But for an introduction, it's a pretty good book. It's good to give to your parents or your friends or maybe even grandparents when they can't really figure out what the hell is asexuality, and they keep asking the same questions, because this is what the book is. It keeps answering the same questions asked in different ways over and over again. So it's a pretty repetitive book. So the last one that I read was, I just saw the marker, it's on 26 minutes, what the hell? This was The Last Wolf by László Krasznahorkai. It told a story of a washed up philosopher or writer who is for some reason called to Spain to write about this middle of nowhere town, because the people there think that he can somehow make this place interesting for other people, and to get more tourists to that destination. And the writer thinks that they are crazy, but since he has nothing else to do, he goes there, and then for some reason they start to look for the lost wolf that died at a very specific year and date. So they are trying to track down this person who killed the wolf. And then there's this whole other story with the wolves there. I'm sure it has a lot of different layers and meanings, but at the end it turns out that it's, oh, I can't spoil it. Well, the interesting thing about it is that it's just one big sentence. So all of the 48 pages here is just one sentence, and it's this continuous babble of what happened. So in a way it reminds of a person who is sitting behind a bar with his beer glass and just telling the story over and over and over and over again. It has no end. It has, well, it has an end. It has a beginning, but it's just continuous word vomit. So yes, yeah, reading this I was like, who is it written to? Who is the audience of it? It was interesting. It was well written. It was interesting. It was well written. It was an experience, but I don't know. Well, I think the good thing about it is that when you read it, you feel that you're cultured. Like, reading highbrow literature, not just some kind of young adult or picture books. So yes, this is a small pile of the books I read. There are at least 3 books that should be on top of this, but I read 11 books. It was a good month. This month is pretty crap, but we'll see. Maybe I'll get to read more books during these 2 weeks of vacation that I have. Leave a like, subscribe, ask any questions you have about these books, and I'll see you another time. Bye!